November 22, 1910. Six control 1/6 of the world's wealth. They're locked inside a private resort on Jekyll Island, Georgia, pretending to be duck hunters. In 10 days, draft the blueprint for a machine that will steal 96% of your money's value over the next century. The public won't know their names. The government will call it federal. But it's not. It's a private bank, and you're about to find out how they did it. By the end of this, you'll understand how America's central bank was created in secret by the exact people it was supposed to regulate. You'll know why the dollar in your pocket is worth less every single year, and you'll see why no major bank has been allowed to fail since their control. Let's go back. 1907. Wall Street is collapsing. $100 million evaporates. Banks are failing. Depositors are rioting in the streets. There's no central bank, no Federal Reserve, no safety net. One man stops the panic. J.P. Morgan. He personally writes checks, bails out banks, saves the system. The public cheers. But Morgan sees the problem. He won't live forever. The next panic could destroy everything, so he starts making calls. Enter Nelson Aldrich, Republican senator, chairman of the Finance Committee, and Rockefeller's father-in-law. Aldrich had tried passing a central banking bill before. The public killed it. Too obvious, too corrupt. Americans remembered the first and second banks of the United States, shut down for being tools of the elite. So Aldrich needed a new strategy. Make it look like reform, hide the authors, and never ever let the public know who's really in charge. November 1910. A private railcar leaves Hoboken, New Jersey. Destination: Jekyll Island Club, a luxury resort owned by the richest families in America. The Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Vanderbilts. On board 6 men. They're using fake names. Nelson Aldrich tells them to strip all identifying marks from their luggage. Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank, later writes in his memoir, "We were told to leave everything behind like fugitives." Why? Because if reporters discover that the biggest bankers in America were meeting in secret to design the nation's monetary system, the plan would be dead on arrival. Who were these men? Aldrich, the senator. Paul Warburg, partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company, German banking aristocracy, the man who would later be called the father of the Federal Reserve. Frank Vanderlip of National City, which would become Citibank. Henry Davison, senior partner at J.P. Morgan. Charles Norton, president of First National Bank. Benjamin Strong, vice president of Bankers Trust. Together they represented roughly 1/6 of global GDP. That's trillions in today's money. And they were about to decide how your money works. For 10 days they don't leave the island. No press. No oversight. Just 6 bankers and 1 senator drafting legislation. They call it the Aldrich Plan. But here's the trick. It's not a government agency. It's a private corporation disguised as a federal institution. 12 regional banks, each owned by member banks as shareholders. When the Fed makes profit, it doesn't go to taxpayers, it goes to the banks. J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, they own shares in the Federal Reserve. You don't. Your government doesn't. The banks do. And the mechanism? Simple. Fractional reserve banking on steroids. Before the Fed, if it had $100 in deposits, it could lend maybe $120. The Fed changes the math. Now that same $100 can become $1,000 in loans. The Fed sets the rules, buys government bonds and prints money out of thin air. Every dollar they create dilutes the ones you own. That's not a side effect. That's the business model. Inflation isn't a bug. It's the feature. Here's the part they don't teach in economics class. When the Fed creates money, doesn't hand it to you. It loans it to banks at near zero interest. Those banks then lend it to you at 5, 10, 15%. You pay interest on money that didn't exist until the moment you borrowed it. And when things go wrong, when banks make bad bets, the Fed steps in as the lender of last resort. That's code for taxpayers eat the losses. 2008, The Fed conjured trillions to bail out Wall Street. 2020, another $6 trillion. The balance sheet is now $9 trillion. That money doesn't vanish. It devalues every dollar you own. But in 1910, none of this is public. The Jekyll Island crew finishes their draft and returns to New York. By January 1911, word leaks. Journalists start asking questions. Aldrich and the bankers deny everything. The plan is shelved. Too obvious, too corrupt. But they don't give up, they just rebrand. The Aldrich plan becomes the Federal Reserve Act. Different name, same structure. They lobby Congress for 2 years. They fund academics to write papers supporting central banking. They buy newspapers. And on December 23, 1910, while most of Congress is home for Christmas, President Woodrow Wilson signs into law. Wilson had campaigned against the money trust. He promised to break up banker control. But behind closed doors, he cut a deal. The bankers got their central bank. Wilson got his progressive agenda funded. Years later, Wilson allegedly said, "I have unwittingly ruined my country." That quote is disputed. But what's not disputed is what happened next. In 1914, the Fed was launched. Within a decade, the dollar loses a quarter of its value. By 1933, the Fed helped orchestrate the confiscation of private gold. Executive Order 6102 made it a crime to own gold bullion, punishable by 10 years. And why? Because gold limits how much money the government can print. Get rid of the gold standard, and the Fed can print infinity. By 1971, Nixon fully severed the dollar from gold. And from 1913 to today, the dollar has lost 96% of its purchasing power, not slowly, not accidentally, by design. Frank Vanderlip admitted it in his 1935 memoir. Our secret expedition to Jekyll Island was the occasion of the actual conception of what eventually became the Federal Reserve System. Paul Warburg, the architect, had ties to European banking dynasties. His brother ran the Reichsbank in Germany. The Fed wasn't an American invention. It was imported. A European central banking model designed to serve the interests of international finance. And the resistance, there was one man who fought back, Congressman Wright Patman. For decades, he grilled Federal Reserve chairmen in hearings. He asked the question no one wanted answered: who owns the Federal Reserve? They never gave a straight answer. Because the truth is inconvenient. It's not owned by the people. It's not even owned by the government. It's owned by the banks it's supposed to regulate. Patman abolishing the Fed multiple times. He never got close. By the time he died, the Fed was untouchable. Here's the pattern. Financial crisis hits. Bankers pose as saviors. They design the solution in secret. They sell it as reform. The public buys it. And decades later, we realize we handed the keys to the vault, to the thieves. The Fed isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. The meeting happened. The men were real. The Jekyll Island Club still stands. You can visit it. There's a museum. They turned the crime scene into a tourist attraction. And it's not over. Every time the Fed prints money, every time they bail out banks, every time they claim it's for your protection, remember Jekyll Island. Remember that 6 bankers in a private resort wrote the rules. Remember that the dollar you work for loses value every year. And that's not an accident. It's the plan. It always was.